This presidential campaign is historic on many levels. The last month alone provided memorable headlines for papers like the New York Times. The newspaper itself became part of the story. On Friday, the Times published a front-page article about foreign workers at Trump's Palm Beach club. Trump responded with a warning.
We're going to open up those libel laws so that when the New York Times writes a hit piece, which is a total disgrace, or when the Washington Post, which is there for other reasons, writes a hit piece, we can sue them and win money instead of having no chance of winning.
BuzzFeed on Monday broke the story of an off-the-record meeting between Trump and the Times editorial board at issue whether that conversation undermined Trump's standing on his defining mission, immigration. Trump's rivals are demanding he allow the Times to release audio of the meetings. Dean Baquet is the executive editor of the New York Times, and we're pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Help us.
You were going to ask me about juggling.
Or the Times crossword puzzle.
We'll get to that. Help us understand this. What exactly happened here? An editorial board meeting, but you're not part of the editorial board,
That's
but
right.
you were there.
Yeah.
You're a news guy who was at the editorial board meeting.
Yeah, I usually don't go.
Yeah.
I asked to go this time, and Andy Rosenthal. I asked to go, frankly, because I had not seen Donald Trump in 20 years. And I thought it would be interesting to see him. So Andy Rosenthal, in his good graces, let me go. And it's the reason, for the record, why these are off the record. Candidates come in and pitch the Times to endorse them. They're open, freewheeling conversations. By the way, this is the only one I've ever been to.
Yeah.
And the reason I think this one leaked out, which to be frank is unfortunate, because off the record conversations.
We assume it came from somebody at the Times.
I have no idea, to be honest. There were like 30 people in the room, including Donald Trump's people. It got talked about in the newsroom. That's probably not a good thing. I may even have talked about it, to be frank. That's probably not a good thing. On the other hand, I also think it's much ado about nothing. Mm-hmm. I think that when 30 people sit in a room and talk to Donald Trump, who's a very vocal guy, and details end up leaking out.
Yeah, but the point is, was it reported that he said on one of his important issues, the building of the wall, did he actually say, well, I'm not really serious about that, I'm just saying that?
I'm gonna pass on what was said in the room because I'm gonna honor
That's the point.
I know, but I'm going to honor the off-the-record that the editorial board put in place, so I'm going to pass on what was said.
But, Dean, it wasn't entirely off the record.
Right. The things
I wonder
Sure.
whether the New York Times made a mistake, because it wasn't entirely off the record. He said something about tariff laws that then went back and said, could we put this on the record? That got put on the record, and according to your own public editor.
Right. He asked that some things be put on the record. Trump did. So he opened the door. He said, I'm happy to talk about some things on the record, and he wanted to be off the record.
So to be clear, if Donald Trump were to say today to put the whole thing on the record, would the New York Times comply?
That would be Andy Rosenthal's call. It really would be.
Would you support it, though? Would you think it'd be a good idea? I mean, clearly, this is something that everybody was trying to figure out, what exactly he said, and if he's reversing.
I would support what Andy chose to do.
Okay, a bit of a dodge.
A little bit of a dodge, because to be frank, it's not. Even though I was present and I agreed to the circumstances, it wasn't my meeting. If I had to do it over again, by the way, I probably shouldn't go to meetings like that. I went to this one, to be frank, because I'm a journalist. And I was dying to hear what he said.
I guess I just wonder.
I don't understand why you couldn't call him up and say, I'd like to sit down with you, and you're the editor of the New York Times, and talk about your candidacy. You didn't need an editorial board meeting to do that.
Our reporters do that. He's not shy about talking.
Okay, but you said you wanted to go to this meeting because you wanted to meet the candidate.
I wanted to go to the meeting to see the show. To be perfect, I'm a journalist. I wanted to go to the meeting to see the show. I wanted to go to the meeting to see what Donald Trump looked like in front of the editorial board of the New York Times, which he has a love-hate relationship with. On the one hand, he's a New York figure, and like a lot of New York figures, he trashes the New York Times in public, but he's deeply respectful of the New York Times in private. I wanted to see that show. And that's a different show than being on the phone with him. And I couldn't resist.
Can we talk about the business of the New York Times and the future of the newspaper, its financial solvency? What has to be done to transform the Times for the future?
I actually think I think this is a large issue, and a lot has been done. I think the New York Times making it to the future, which I'm convinced it will, is one of the most important stories in American journalism. The New York Times is making a very powerful bet, and most other news organizations have not made the bet. And the bet goes like this: we will make it to the future as a high-quality journalistic institution, without compromise, without slipping into gossip. And so this is an interesting, I think, historical bet. And what will it take to do that? It'll take first sticking to our guns. We will cover big, ambitious stories in big, ambitious ways. And we have already embraced new technologies and new ways to tell stories and do them consistent with the values of the New York Times.
I know one of the investments that you're making is virtual reality storytelling. Tell us a little bit more about it. They were showing me this morning that you can click on these stories and essentially see 360.
Yeah. You can see that. This is terrific stuff, I think. Virtual reality is happening.
Yeah.
This
Look at this.
What's been the feedback on
it? It makes you feel like you're there.
Huge. I mean, 500,000 people have downloaded our virtual reality app, and more than 1 million people have actually looked at virtual reality. Journalistically, it's powerful. It's a great way to tell stories.
And what are we looking at here? This is the border, right?
You were looking at a film that was made in conjunction with a magazine piece in which a Border Patrol guard was accused of killing a kid who was on the other side of the fence. And it's just a very powerful story. But what virtual reality brings to the
it's like you're there.
to the story,
Yeah, I must say, this is a very good demonstration.
Like you're there.
None of these things screw up.
The Border Patrol agent who's been charged with a crime, his claim was that the kid threw a rock over the fence.
Yeah.
If you look at the fence in virtual reality and you see how high it is, and you see the openings in it, his story is just unbelievable.
It's great for stories
really
where
brings you there.
knowing where you are and knowing the
Yes.
distance and things like that. Virtual reality is
By the way,
really helpful.
one of the most powerful examples of virtual reality was the one where we set the virtual reality team. I can't remember if it's the Iowa caucuses or the New Hampshire primary, and you were in a Donald Trump rally.
Yeah, those
And
rallies.
it was the
also
first
great.
time I sat there and said, no wonder he thinks he can win. It was like
Because the rally is
Very, very
it was
powerful.
huge. It was powerful.
Dean Baquet, it's so nice to see you. Thanks for talking and thanks for the demonstration.
Great to have you here.